Hey, Haunty Jerry here, and it is time to take a look at some box office figures right now for this past weekend, January 30th through February 1st. And it was another weekend here, which is kind of typical here in January and February, where horror films really kind of carry the box office. That was true once again this past weekend with Sam Raimi's big return to directing a horror comedy, his first one since Drag Me to Hell, which was well over a decade ago. And this time he is back with the office horror comedy Send Help, which stars Dylan O'Brien and Rachel McAdams, who is getting some really amazing reviews for her performance in this movie, as is the movie in general. It's been a really popular movie with critics, especially here on YouTube. I know a lot of the YouTube critics here that I do follow. They have really enjoyed the movie, and it's really boosted the box office for this movie in its opening weekend, where Send Help actually brought in $20 million over the weekend. It was really only projected to be around the 15 million mark. That's what they were expecting this movie to do. So it actually exceeded expectations here, and really a triumphant return, shall we say, for Sam Raimi into the directing of horror and comedy. It's kind of like his homecoming, if you will, and horror audiences definitely responded. Now, Send Help did open up in a little under 3,500 screens and did a per screen average of $5,755 per screen. So a fairly decent PSA there. And now a surprise at number two, at least a surprise that I definitely did not see coming, was Iron Lung, which is a written, directed, produced, financed, and starring Markiplier, a very famous YouTuber, I will admit. Of his, I hear 40 million subscribers. I am not one of them. So apparently, it is based on an independent video game that Markiplier just absolutely loved. And it's just his real passion was to make this movie. And apparently, that passion does come out. Not the best critically reviewed movie, definitely nowhere near the critical response, positive anyways, towards Iron Lung like it was towards Send Help. But the audiences definitely responded. His fan base definitely responded and boosted this movie into a number two position with a much higher than expected box office gross of almost $18 million, $17.8 million to be precise, opening on just a little bit over 3,000 screens. And for a per screen average, the best in the top five, by the way, as far as per screen average, of over $5,900 per screen. Now, it'll be interesting to see what the legs of both of these top two movies are. I expect Send Help, especially with the very positive critical response, to leg out a little bit better than Iron Lung, which does seem to be just to be a front-loaded movie. But of course, we're going to find that out this next weekend. All right, moving on to number three, another surprise entry in the top five. And let me say before I get into this that this is by far the most controversial release of a movie into theaters so far here in 2026. So I am going to be very honest and unbiased in my assessment as far as what and how this movie performed. And I am speaking about Melania, the documentary, which is the documentary, I guess, of the 20 days before this past inauguration of Donald Trump, of Melania Trump's journey, whatever that is. This is a movie that I haven't seen, and not very many critics have seen this movie. However, audiences did show up, and enough for Melania's documentary to end up in third place this past weekend with a box office gross of $7 million. Yes, $7 million for a documentary in January, especially post-pandemic, is a pretty decent opening weekend. That much is true. However, if you take a look at the production budget as well as all the rights and everything and marketing and all the costs of this movie, Amazon spent about $75 million on the movie. So this movie clearly has to make north of $100 million total gross to be able to claim a profit. So will it be a hit from a profit standpoint? More than likely not. Yes, people showed up. Yes, there were some audiences across America, depending on what town and location you were in, that did quite well. I know that the number one location for this documentary was in Boca Raton, Florida. Another one of the top locations is actually here in Michigan, kind of a random city if you're from Michigan, but Jackson, Michigan was the top city in Michigan in attendance for Melania, the documentary. Now, of course, there were some key areas in the country where this movie did not play well at all. And primarily New York City, LA. It was decent enough for a third place opening. However, not nearly strong enough to take out the two horror juggernauts that ended up being in first and second place. All right, so that is my unbiased take on this very controversial documentary. Now let's move on to a couple of movies that aren't controversial at all, beginning with fourth place's Zootopia 2, a huge, huge hit for Disney, adding another $5.8 million to its box office gross. Actually, an increase of almost 10% over last week. So this movie is still increasing from week to week. And with the Academy Awards coming up, it could well leg it out until the Academy Awards, where it is nominated, by the way, for Best Animated Picture. Keep in mind, Zootopia 1 actually won that award. So I do think that Zootopia 2 does stand a chance. Right now, I would almost have to go with K-pop Demon Hunters in that category. But Zootopia 2 definitely has a chance. But the audiences are loving this movie. So still on almost 3,000 screens. Only dropped 50 screens from last week. Still doing over $2,000 PSA, and domestically has already made over $400 million. So you can almost bet that there will be a Zootopia 3. Okay, moving on to fifth place and another new release. And this is I think it's almost an annual Jason Statham January movie thriller. And this one is called Shelter. Did not do as well as past Jason Statham movies have. Perhaps that could have been with the competition coming from Send Help and Iron Lung, especially Iron Lung, which did skew more of a male and younger male audience. So I am thinking that perhaps may have affected Shelter's box office gross. But, as with most Jason Statham movies, I think that the audience, that he has kind of this built-in audience that will eventually find it, even if they do not see it in its theatrical run, they will catch it on streaming. But did okay this weekend, did $5.5 million on a little over 2,700 screens for a 2019 per screen average. $5.5 million is a decent gross, not a great gross. And I'm sure that this movie will probably take a pretty big tumble this next weekend. Okay, so while Send Help and Iron Lung definitely injected some kind of real excitement into the box office this past weekend, and audiences appear to definitely be ready to go back to the theater. They're done with all that winter weather crap and hopefully are all dug out from all the snowstorms, and I think people are ready to go back to the theater. Unfortunately, this past weekend still was about 5% down from the same weekend last year, but good news is that through January, grosses were actually up around 10 to 13%, I think was the actual percentage, up from last year. So a pretty decent January when compared to last year. And of course, we're trying to get to that 10 billion mark, which would be the first time since the pandemic that the box office would end up at 10 billion for the year. So hopefully we get there. January is a pretty good start there. We have some decent movies also coming out here in February, a couple of blockbuster potential movies, including the next Scream movie, Scream 7. Nev Campbell's big return is coming out in February. So I would expect a pretty decent box office here in the next month as well. And it all begins this next week when, unfortunately, I think it's going to be a little bit on the slower side, but we will see. There is a comedy that is, interestingly enough, I checked on AMC's website yesterday, is really doing well with advanced ticket sales here in the Detroit area. And it is a movie called Solo Mio. And it is opening this week, along with the next Strangers movie, and hopefully the final one in this trilogy. Well, it will be the final one in the trilogy, hopefully the final one in the Strangers franchise. But The Strangers Chapter 3 is also opening up, and a brand new Dracula movie, which has gotten a little bit of press lately. So it'll be interesting to see what that contributes to the box office. But overall, I would expect a little bit of a decline from this week. Of course, it'll be interesting to see what Send Help does in its second weekend, how big of a drop Iron Lung and Melania take, and how all of that together will dictate really the size of drop or even potentially a gain that we will make in this next weekend at the box office. All right, but that is going to be it for this box office recap. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. If you have made it this far and you haven't already, I really would appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe to my channel here, as well as like, share this video. Let me know what you think of any of these movies. If you saw any of these movies, what were your thoughts? Did you see any movie this week, and maybe not even in the top 5, but another movie out at the theater? Let me know what you thought of that movie as well. Once again, thank you so much for spending the past few minutes with me. I really do appreciate it. I've had a great time, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon. But until then, that's a wrap.